On this episode, I am doing a reaction video to this article, Gen Z Parents Don't Want to Read to Their Kids, New Study Shows. It was in Parents and it's written by Sherry Gordon, CLC. New research by HarperCollins publishers in the UK reveals that parents, specifically Gen Z parents, no longer enjoy reading aloud to their children. In fact, many reported that they don't even find reading to kids fun. Instead, they see reading as a subject to learn. That's sad. Like, if you're not finding reading to your kids fun, then I think you may be doing it wrong, because unless you're reading the same book over and over and over again, like reading a book one time, it can be fun. Like Llama Llama Red Pajama over and over and over again, unless you're rapping it like Ludacris. If you haven't watched that video, go do that. Yes, it can be tedious and it can be boring, but a lot of the time, reading with kids is super enjoyable. Let's continue. In the study, researchers found that fewer than half, or 41%, of 0 to 4-year-olds are frequently read to. These findings represent a steep decline from 64% in 2012. So we're talking 64% in 2012 to 41% in 2024. That is a significant decline, and it's going to have detrimental effects on our youth that we aren't aware of yet. They also discovered that boys and girls have different experiences when it comes to reading. Only 29% of 0 to 2-year-old boys are read to every day or nearly every day, compared to 44% of girls in the same age group. I mean, I get it. Boys are probably much more active and they're moving and they're grooving, and the girls are probably much more likely to sit in your lap and listen and be in tune. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to look one way. Your son can be on the floor and they could be moving and grooving, or they could be standing up and they could be dancing and all the things, and you're reading to them and you're showing them pictures. And you're allowing them to have that energy so that they're still getting the benefits of you reading to them. So, and I mean, we're seeing the boy crisis. If you've never read that book, I highly recommend it. But our boys are falling behind compared to our girls, and we need to start lifting up all of our kids, regardless of their gender, so that they're getting the skills that they need to be adaptable for the 21st century. This study highlights the downfall of literacy in young children, which is such an important part of language development, says Jocelyn M. Wood, SLP, PLLC, a child development expert and bilingual speech-language pathologist. Although we are just starting to see that less parents are taking the time to read with their children, the downwind effects will be tenfold, says Wood. We will begin to see children who lack language skills, critical thinking skills, and early literacy skills that come from book reading, not to mention the loss of bonding time with caregivers. I remember when I was at my internship and I really wanted to learn how to do learning disability assessments. And so I went to the school psychologist. I was like, hey, will you train me? And he's like, yes, but here's the thing. I'm going to have you ask 3 questions before you even do any kind of assessment during that clinical interview. He's like, here's the 3 questions. 1, how often did you, when you were a child, how often did you see an adult in your household reading for fun? 2, how many books were there in your house growing up? And 3, how often would an adult take you to the library? Those 3 questions to me were like, what? But they were so telling, because so many individuals don't see parents reading to them or adults reading, and we'll get to that in a second. They don't have access to books. That's why so many pediatricians right now are throwing books at their patients when they're young, so that the child has books in their hand. And then the library, they just don't, with everything else going on, some parents just don't have the time to take their kids to the library, which was why having library in schools is so important. Let's continue. So next headline, what researchers discovered. Despite the fact that reading aloud to babies and kids is a proven way to build a love of reading, improve vocabulary, enhance cognitive development, and more, researchers in the 2024 Understanding the Children's Book Consumer Survey discovered that the amount of parents reading aloud to their children is at an all-time low. I mean, yeah, oh, this is going to have bad effects on us later on, people. Part of this could be attributed to unfavorable views on reading, since many of the parents surveyed do not consider it an enjoyable pastime. I mean, I'm starting to see more and more adults not really enjoy reading, because, like, think about it. If you have Disney, Netflix, or Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu versus reading, and you have to use your imagination in one, and it's just given to you in the other, and the dopamine hits and all of those things, and it's in bite-sized chunkable pieces, whereas like a book, it takes you hours to read. Well, people are going to lean more towards this given our attention economy compared to the book. So I am seeing fewer adults reading. I have a very close friend that tells me all the time, she's like, I wish I loved reading. I want to read more. I have this whole stack of books that I want to read, but it just, other things win out. And about 1 in 3 Gen Z parents view reading as a subject to learn, compared to 1 in 5 Gen X parents. That said, 34% of parents of kids 0 to 13 years old wish they had more time to read to their kids. Well, that's good. Maybe we should stop enrolling them in so many extracurricular activities, and then we'd have time to read to them. But that's just me. The act of reading to children typically falls at the end of a very long, busy day in the life of a parent, where honestly, more than anything, you just want to get your kid to bed so that you yourself can also take a breath, says Jessica Silariski, MS, co-founder and CEO of Ignite Reading, a reading intervention company. I mean, I get it. But at the same time, reading a 5-minute book doesn't take that long. We need to do this because it's going to be in the best interest of our children and our youth overall. This is unfortunate given that reading with your child can actually be extremely relaxing and pleasurable experience, says Silariski. Plus, it helps build a love of reading in them as well. Yeah, because I remember I had this client, he was a teenager. He's like, nobody reads. And I'm like, actually, like, did you know that they did a survey on millionaires, and the average millionaire reads at least 12 books a year? And he was like, what? And I was like, yes, like millionaires, people that are able to delay their gratification by not spending money, are able to read 12 books a year. I think this is probably a good practice for us to practice. According to Allison David, Consumer Insight Director at Far Shore and HarperCollins Children's Books, kids who are read to every day are 3 times more likely to choose to read on their own compared to kids who are only read to on a weekly basis. If you read to your child, they're going to love to read. If you take them to the library, they're going to love to read. Believe me, this is super uber important, because when I used to teach lifespan development, there was one behavior that I encouraged all my students to do across their lifespan, because it helps with your cognitive abilities and it prevents you from having a significant drop in your cognitive abilities later on in life. You want to know what that is? Reading. Read every day. It is so good for you. It's stimulating. It's not giving you that dopamine hit, all like, but it's so good for you to do. Okay, next header. Why Gen Z parents might have an aversion to reading. Literacy experts indicate there are a number of factors at play when it comes to the lack of desire and the loss of interest in reading to kids. From busy schedules, yes, to an overabundance of homework to get through first, it seems like reading for enjoyment is getting squeezed out. Again, you don't have to enroll your children in as many extracurricular activities as you're doing, because then you'll have more time. Parents may not understand the potential value of reading to their children or how fun and engaging it can be, says Stephanie Alatadaba, PhD, a professor of the Patsy and Ray Caldwell Centennial Chair in Teaching and Learning at SMU. For this reason, some experts like Matthew Danbrock, MA, a clinician with expertise in school and child psychology, believe that while reading to kids is undoubtedly important, society needs to put less pressure on parents. Yes, it's called parental burnout. 5.5 million of us have it. Instead, Dan Brock feels the focus should be on helping parents learn how to instill a love of reading, especially since so many kids struggle with reading comprehension. The truth is, it can be mentally taxing for parents to try to teach a struggling reader to find reading fun. Yes, this is where I think like we need to let teachers be teachers and teach them how to read, because hell, I don't know how to teach my kids how to read. I'm just thankful that their teachers are doing a wonderful job because they can all read. And we need to be doing the parents and be instilling that value, that instilling that love of reading. Let teachers teach, let parents instill the love of reading. Absolutely. The HarperCollins study found that parents are seeing reading as more of a schoolwork thing to do rather than it being a fun or enjoyable thing. He says this perception also could be influenced by the challenges that children face in learning to read. Approximately 5 to 10% of elementary age children are estimated to have a specific learning disability in reading, with many more at risk. Because here's the thing, I listened to a really good podcast, and I would encourage all of you guys to listen to. It's Told a Story, and it talks about why so many of our kids are struggling with reading. It's because of how, even though I just told you about schools, it talks all about how a lot of schools, because they've gone to how they've been teaching them, it isn't actually the best way. But now we're starting to see a swing back, and they're actually starting to practice evidence-based strategies for teaching kids how to read. So, but that's why there's such a 5 to 10% of elementary age children have some kind of learning disability, reading disability. Let's go with that. Why reading to kids is important. While it may be obvious that reading to kids is important, some parents may not realize just how important that simple task is. One study found that young kids whose parents read to them will hear nearly 1.5 million more words by the time they turn 5 years old than kids who were not read to at all. Some literacy experts refer to this as the million-word gap. Reading aloud to your child also helps develop language and literacy skills, says Al-Tataba. It can foster communication, connection, and curiosity. It can build background knowledge. It can foster motivation to read, attention, and self-regulation. Reading can also help children learn about how letters sound and sounds relate to each other. Yes, these are all good things that we want our children to have. Kids are introduced to a range of concepts and ideas they may not experience in daily life when they are regularly read to, adds Wood. For example, we live in Brooklyn, so reading books about characters in other countries or in a more rural setting helps my son empathize with other ways of life. Yes. Because you're not going to be able to expose them to everything, but you could read a book and it exposes them to lots of different things. And then you could have conversations and interactions about it. And it's marvelous. Moreover, reading together is a time to engage in joint attention, for kids to observe lip movements for new words and develop social-emotional learning, such as empathy and co-regulation. I just talked about that with the millionaires, like co-regulation, like being able to delay gratification, those self-control skills that are important. When parents don't read to young children, those children do not develop language skills in the same way because they are hearing less language overall, says Wood. Numerous studies have pointed to the difference in the number of words heard by children who are read to and not read to, and it would be impossible to make up that number in conversational speech alone. These children are also more likely to experience a learning disability rather later on due to lack of exposure to learning and print. Or language and how Gen Z can make reading to their kids easier and fun. According to Wood, the best way to incorporate reading into your day is to make it part of your routine. Yes, absolutely. We know this from Atomic Habits if you've ever read that. She suggests reframing reading aloud to your kids. It doesn't have to take up a large chunk of time. No, it doesn't. Read when it's convenient for you and for as long as you are able to. Just spending 10 to 15 minutes reading a book together makes a huge difference, she says. I mean, I would even argue 5 minutes. Like, let's work with what we've got, people. It doesn't have to be 10. It doesn't have to be 15. It doesn't have to be an hour. It can be as little as 5. Also, make sure you pick books that are fun to read, says Risky. I think oftentimes as parents, when you think about reading aloud, we think that we have to be reading really educational things, and those things more often than not can be less fun and exciting to read than maybe just a short, silly story. Exactly. Choose fun things like this is one of my favorites. Pig the Stinker. It is so good. I highly recommend it. All right. Look for books that are exciting or will make you laugh. Yes, she says, in that moment, you are building this love of reading and this joy around reading together, not just for your child, but also for yourself. And let your kids choose books. Take them to the library, like I already mentioned before, and let them choose books. And it might not be your favorite, but like they're laughing and they're giggling, and you're going to experience those positive emotions from it. Try not to overthink your book selections and focus on books that you both enjoy, she says, and pick a time of day to read when it's convenient for both of you. Rather than doing it at the end of the day when you are just burnt out, what if it was was books and breakfast? Okay, that's a possibility. I mean, we always read before bedtime as part of our wind down time, like our bedtime routine. Each child every other, we have a rotation, and they choose a book, and then everyone reads it together. How to get your kids to love reading. Swirsky also recommends taking your child to the library, I already said that, or the bookstore and letting them select whatever book they want to read without judging them or telling them no. Yes, I agree. These books, she says, are gateway books that help them see reading as an enjoyable activity and can eventually lead them to fall in love with reading. That's what we want. The biggest piece of advice I can give as a parent and an educator is letting them read the silly, ridiculous books that they want to read, like Dog Man and Captain Underpants, and all of the books with bathroom humor that, as a parent, you might find absolutely mortifying. I don't find it mortifying. I mean, I did write the number 2 parenting book. Says Horisky, letting them load up on the comics and the graphic novels and just anything they're excited to read is the way that you're going to unlock the love of reading. Here's another thing. Look at your library. They might have like a book club for kids. So at our library, they do a graphic novel every month. And that's how like my kids learned about the graphic novel Bird and Squirrel, which they absolutely love. It is so funny. And like literally we would be on road trips and I'd be reading Bird and Squirrel all together, which took like 45 minutes, but it was 45 minutes that we were all laughing. We were all giggling. We were all interacting together. It was amazing. Here's other tips for building a love for reading include find relevant books. We already talked about that. Incorporate books that speak to your child's interests and reflect their community. Number 2, keep reading engaging. Select books with engaging elements such as pictures or textured pages and make sure to discuss them while reading. Okay. Integrate multimedia. Keep your child invested in the story by expanding their knowledge on the topic with multiple types of media. For example, if you just finished reading a book about the zoo, show them a movie about a trip to the zoo. Another thing you can do is like, okay, a character, like, is there a different, so like we love the Mo Williams Elephant and Piggy series. And like, I actually created my own Elephant and Piggy story. I can't even remember at this point, but like we would talk about it and we would tell it over breakfast and the kids just loved it. And then the other thing that we started with Elephant and Piggy is that my husband has voices for Gerald and he has voices for Piggy, and it just makes the kids laugh and it's engaging and all of those things. Let them take charge. Allow your child to browse or look at books on their own. Absolutely. And then use different languages. If your family is multilingual, try reading to your kids in a language other than the one you primarily speak. So like my family is a bilingual family. My dad talks to my children in Spanish because we're Mexican. And so we will, if we can find a book that comes in both English and Spanish, we will do that because we want them to learn Spanish. And I think the other thing is, like I already mentioned it, like make it fun. It doesn't have to be like they're in your lap, sitting down, looking at you or looking at the book. You guys could be walking. I know there's lots of, I love this too. Like when you go for a walk and they've like broken up a book and like you have to keep walking to read the book. Love that. It could make it look however it works for you. And the other thing is, I think making it fun, like having voices, telling other stories, like what do you think they're feeling in this moment? What, like look at, and I would always do like, because I'm a psychologist, so I'd be like emotions, like look at their emotion, like what is their face telling you in this moment? And like, can we all make faces? So like make the angry face, make the silly face, like all of the things, make it enjoyable. We want to make our kids love reading. I don't think this is a Gen Z parent thing only. I think it's probably millennials too. I think Gen Z is just getting a bad rap in this article. But together we can encourage their creative thinking, their literacy skills, their imagination, their problem solving, their emotional. They're able to read emotions on faces and all of those things. By doing all of these things, by setting up this love for reading early on, they're going to be able to excel later on because it's such a huge thing for later academic ability. By doing all of these things, we're going to be throat punching this Gen Z mental health crisis. Let's go.